Dear participants, we start our traditional section, Springer section we call, but it's IFMBE section. And it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Professor Andrei from the National University of Singapore. He will present the presentation with how to write and publish a scientific paper. So you are the early stage career, young researchers, students, master students, PhD students. So hope at the end of the section a lot of questions regarding the publishing and writing the papers, scientific papers. So, Professor Vladimir, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Scimago, for the introduction. Thank you everyone for joining. So the purpose of the presentation today is to demystify a bit the relationship between editors on one hand and authors of scientific papers. Probably you are at the very early stage of your career. How many of you have already published a journal paper? Any? You have? Yes? How many of you had rejected a journal paper? Yes? Okay, so one of the take-home messages of today's presentation is that rejection happens in scientific, in the life of a scientist, so we must learn how to deal with such situations. Hopefully today's presentation will give you some useful information on that. And also try to give you a bit of cues on how to avoid this kind of unpleasant situations, how to approach easier this whole process of writing and publishing a scientific article, because scientific articles are, I'd say, a crucial part of in the life of a scientist, right? It's basically part of our CV. Once we publish an article, it stays out there. It's part of our scientific persona, right? So publishing articles is something that all scientists should do. Now, before I go further, let me tell you that besides being a deputy editor for the Medical and Biological Engineering and Computing Journal, which is one of the oldest and most reputable bioengineering journals out there, I am also a researcher, as Professor Monaiko mentioned. I'm at the National University of Singapore. I have my own research program, my own lab. We're doing research related to neural engineering, brain-computer interfaces, and so on. So I will try in my presentation to give you the perspective not only as an editor, but also from the point of view of an author, reviewer, because I passed through all these stages. I've published in this journal before becoming an editor. So the presentation is structured as you see here. I will start first with a few hints on the preparatory steps that go into preparing a scientific manuscript. And then I will give you the perspective, the author's perspective of the whole process. I will try to cover also the editor's perspective and also the reviewer's perspective, so that you have an idea of what happens when you're actually submitting a manuscript to a journal. Okay? And then I will just conclude with hopefully some useful tips on certain tools that can be used to ease your work as an author while preparing the manuscript. Okay, so before we actually start writing down our manuscript, you must always keep asking yourself, and actually this is not only about writing down, about preparing your manuscript, but these are a set of questions that should guide the researcher throughout the steps of performing their research, right? So always keep asking about you. Have I done something new and interesting? Yeah. Are there challenges in my work that I managed to solve via the methods that I'm, or the approaches that I'm developing? have I provided solutions to some difficult problems? What are these problems? How are they overcoming current bottlenecks, current problems that are out there in literature related to this specific field that you are working in? And how does my work further current knowledge? Yeah, so always keep asking yourself, am I doing something really novel? Is it something, the work that I'm trying to publish, is it something that would be interesting for others? How would that be, right? So, you know, the usefulness of this question is that it will help us develop both a critical view of our work, yeah, but also try to understand how your work is being perceived by the audience. Okay, so the first hint is that while preparing your manuscript, you should continuously document your work. So don't leave everything for the stage when you're actually drafting your manuscript, right? Just to give you an anecdote here, I remember the first article that I published. Yeah, it was a conference article, probably about 3 months after I started my PhD. I've done my master's work in the same lab, so I've already completed a lot of work, but you know, I was not really aware of all these things, so I was, you know, my documentation was not that great, right? So, you know, it was really tough not having the actual materials. It's useful to gather from very early on. You know, you're preparing some slides maybe to present to your supervisor, right? Keep them and try to develop on them your ideas. Take a good note. Keep tracking the literature that you're reading, right? Take notes. That's always very useful because it helps you structure your knowledge in a specific way. Creating figures is also very important, and I'll go through this a bit later. So again, before actually drafting your manuscript, try to think about this. How will the audience perceive what I'm writing? Right? So keep always in mind who is your audience, who are you addressing your work to? Okay? Because this will help you structure better your work, make it more understandable to the readers, right? So think of, okay, what do I want to transmit to the readership of the journal where I'm publishing the work, right? What is actually the end goal of writing a manuscript, right? The end goal is not to just throw out there all the results that you have obtained during some experiments or anything that you know about a specific topic, right? The reason why you're publishing your work is to try to send your message, right? Try to make the audience understand what is really crucial in your work. Yeah, so keep this in mind. And always you must start with the end in mind, with the audience that you are addressing, and think about how to best pass your message to them. Right? Now, again, very important step is to identify the target journal. A few tips here. Now, you know, maybe before I go into that, just to give you some stats, I read a report from 2023, so things may have changed, maybe got even worse since then, that in 2022 there were about 1,000 new scientific journals that appeared on the market, and about 400 that ceased publication, right? So this is a continuously changing environment. There are unfortunately many journals out there that are there just to make gains, make profit, right? So keep in mind that you must choose a journal that is really suitable for your work, a journal that is reputable, that has a well-kept track record, right? Because journals may come and disappear, and it's very important when you actually present your work, right? Again, your papers are your CV, right? So once you publish something, it stays in your CV. It's not very great to have papers that have been published in a journal that just disappeared, right? So keep track of things such as the citation score, right, of the journal. Again, check out some of the previously published papers there and see whether the topic of the journal matches well your field. Yeah. And a good tip here would be that look at the references of your work, right? From which journal have you gathered most of the papers, right? Probably that's your target journal, because since you've read a lot of papers from a specific journal, you have 2 or 3 papers, let's say, from the same journal. That means that that's the closest to your topic. Okay, so think of that journal as the main target for submitting your work. A good tip here, yeah. So there's this site that has been created by a group of scientists from the UK. Think, Check, Submit, which keeps track also of a list of the predatory journals. I don't know, are you aware with predatory journals? What does that mean? Yeah. So basically, these are journals that are promising you fast publication and trying to get you submit something there, but actually their goal is just to make money out of your work, right? And these are journals that are not very reputable, let's say. So you must be aware of these kind of things. So again, check. You can do such checks. Check this website. Check other links. There are other repositories about predatory journals where you can see whether the journal that you're choosing is a journal that is reputable or not. Okay. Now a few things about the types of articles and journals that are out there. You've probably heard of open access, right? Are you familiar with that? So open access means that all the papers that are published in that journal, they are freely available to everyone, to the audience, right? Now, theoretically, that's a good thing, because open science is something that we should aim for, yeah? General knowledge that is available for everyone. However, there are a few things to consider here. As I said previously, many journals are just trying to make a lot of money from the works that scientists are submitting, right? So you have submission fees, processing fees that can go up to $10,000 for an article, right? So there's a fine balance here. Now, there are a lot of discussions in this area whether, what type of model of journal is more suitable. The vast majority of journals nowadays are hybrid access journal, as is the journal that I'm working for, MBEC. And that means that your article, if it is accepted for publication, is free of charge. If your article is up to a certain number of pages in MBEC, the limit is 18 pages. Other journals from other publishers, they have different limits there. So you only pay if you are surpassing that page limit. Yeah? Or you can pay if you want to make your article freely available to readership. And that's usually the case when your work is funded by European projects, for example, who support these kind of things. So you can use that option to pay a fee to make your article freely available to the audience. Otherwise, the articles will stay behind the paywall, so it's free for you, but for the readership to actually read these journals, they need to be part of some institutions that pay subscription fees to the publishers or to some databases that collect this kind of journals. Now, a recent option is that of a preprint repository. So you've probably heard of ResearchGate, for example, right? Are you familiar? Yeah. So there are several others. Yeah. So there's ResearchGate, there's Archive, there's called Science in France. So these are some options that allow you to post free versions of your work. So even if you have a paper that has been published, yeah, you need to communicate with the journal and see whether they accept to post a version of that paper to a preprint repository, right? And you can do that. They usually accept that with the condition that, for example, you post a version of your article before it goes through all the review process that we're going to discuss, right? So you can publish an early version of your paper into such a repository, and that's perfectly fine for the journals as well, right? So this is actually a very good thing that is out there. And the majority of the journals nowadays they actually accept publications that have been previously posted in freely available repositories. By the way, if you have questions at any time, just feel free to interrupt me. This is not a classical lecture, so since we're a small audience, we can interact easier. So anytime you have some questions or you want to clarify some things, just please ask questions. Okay, now, assuming that you are prepared, you've done your work, you are ready, you've chosen your journal, you are ready to actually start writing up your manuscript, right? And as you're probably aware, the manuscript has various sections, right? As you see here, so it has a title, an abstract, an introduction section, a method section, a results, and a discussion section, and a conclusion section. So this is the general structure. Some journals may vary from the structure, but this is the, let's say, widely accepted structure. And of course, the references. Right? Now, I put here separately the figures and the vision statement because these are very important parts of the paper, and you'll see why I mean that. I think figures are increasingly seen as something that is very important for a paper. Now, what is a vision statement, right? Now, think about the following situation. You are in an elevator of your building and you meet with the rector, or you meet with Bill Gates, right? He's coming to visit your university and he's asking, oh, how are you? What is your work on? Right? You have basically 20 seconds to tell that person what your work is about and to maybe impress, get some funding or get some support or some, you know. So be prepared, always be prepared to have this vision statement about your work, right? This is a very short thing, a very short summary of your work. What is the most important thing about your work that you can say, you know, to someone that you just meet, right? So that's what the Americans call an elevator pitch, right? So, and why is this so important? This is important because once you are able to summarize in just a couple of sentences your whole work, it means that you are ready to actually extrapolate that and to present your work in such a way that it is easy to understand and is attractive to your readership, right? Okay, now having said that, let's see, for those that have actually published a paper, what do you think? Which of these sections should be the one that you start with? What would you start with first? From your experience, those that have previously prepared the manuscript, what did you start with? The results? Close, yeah. Any other opinion?
Vision statement.
Yeah, that's not a section per se, it's basically kind of like an outline, right? Yeah, of course, vision statement, yes, you should always have it there in the back of your head. But when you're actually drafting, among these sections here on this line, what would you start with? Is it the title, abstract? Someone said abstract, someone said results. Any other opinion?
I also think about the result expression.
Okay, yes, correct. I mean, that's what majority of established researchers suggest, right? And why is it the method? Again, I'll give you my own example. When I started writing that paper that I mentioned, right? I had about 2 months. I said, oh, that's more than enough until the submission deadline for the conference, right? It's okay, I mean, I already have the results, no problem, I'll be ready. I thought in a couple of weeks the paper would be ready. Well, after a couple of weeks I can tell you that I only had probably a paragraph from the introduction, because I started with the introduction. The introduction is the most difficult part to start with, you know? So never do that. Start with the methods. Why? Because you are the most familiar with that part, right? You've already done the data analysis, you've already done experiments, right? You are very familiar with that. you already have probably prepared a document with all the steps. If your work required an ethical approval from the committee, that requires the ethical committee of your institute or of your university, right? The so-called IRB. They require the description of the documents in a very similar format to what the methods section would look for your paper, you know. So you already have the materials. You are the most familiar with that part. So start with the methods, okay? And then, as you'll see, you can go through the results, the discussion, and then conclusion or then introduction, and I'll go through all these one by one. Okay, so don't start with the introduction. Right, now, before we go into that, why I mentioned that figures are so important. Now I'll give you a bit, I'll mix a bit my presentation with the editor's perspective, you know. Think of an editor. We are receiving about 3,000 papers per year. We are 5 people that are triaging the papers, right? We need to decide as editors which papers should actually go further for review, right? What is the most attractive part that it is in a manuscript, right? Figures, right? So once your figures are expressive, they contain information that is very clear, that allows the reader to immediately get a glimpse of what the content of that paper is. That makes a huge difference. Once me as an editor, I see some very interesting figures, and figures that immediately give me an idea about the content of the manuscript. That's already halfway through me pushing this paper to the reviewers. Yeah? So, as you see here, a figure is 1,000 words, so the data that is in the figures are the driving force of your paper. So they are critical. Spend a lot of time to make your figures easy to understand. Don't overcrowd them. Yeah. Don't duplicate information in the figures with tables and so on. Right. Make the figures be self-contained, self-explanatory. So if a reader goes through just the figures and the caption underneath, the text that describes the figures underneath, from the beginning of the end of the papers, let's say 5 figures or 3 figures, that reader should understand almost everything that is in that paper. Yeah, so make them self-explanatory. Do not use as caption here just figure 1, experimental setup and procedure, and that's it. No. Try to describe, okay, what is in this figure, for example. It's a figure from one of my journal papers. Yeah? So, make a figure, for example, a good idea is make a figure that gives an overview of the methodology. This is quite common right now, that the first figure in a journal paper should be an overview figure of your methodology. A figure that describes the whole idea of the paper. Yeah. Again, be careful with the styling, that's very important. And nowadays there are so many tools that allow you to create very nice figures out there, including AI, but we'll come back to the AI here, and I hope you will remember me and ask some questions about that at the end. Alright, so having said that, let's go to the methods, right? So, as we said, methods are the first section that you should start with when writing your article, right? Now, how is it best to structure your methods? Now, first thing is to try to structure it in such a way, in a logical way. Yeah? Try to follow a logical flow of the experiments that you have performed. Yeah? So, for example, present the methods in the order of the steps that you have performed during your experiments, for example. Yeah? Start with data collection. Yeah? You've used, let's say, you've done a study on humans. You've collected data from a certain number of participants, so start with that. What is your sample size? How many subjects? Also there at the beginning of the method section, if you are dealing with human subjects, you always must provide the ethical approval. So there's this IRB document that I mentioned earlier, and nowadays this is a check that all the journals do, that there are these ethical statements in your paper. Yeah? And then describe, as I said, describe the sample size, start describing the methods. One option here would be to structure the method section in subsections, right? So 1 would be data collection. Yeah? Subsection 2 would be data analysis, right? And then another subsection could be the statistical analysis, for example. Yeah, so try to structure this in a logical way that is as close as possible to the way that you've actually performed the experiments you've done your work, so that it's easy to follow. And try to have, this is very important, try to have your methods described in such a way that they are replicable. So that means that everyone that reads your paper should be able to reproduce the same methodology, the same approach that you have used, right? This is very important because everyone that publishes something that is based on your work, yeah, should be able to reproduce your results. And why is that? Because that attracts citations, right? Another goal of your work is to attract as many citations as possible, right? So if you present your work in such a way that others can use your results and try to do something better, that means that you will get a citation from them. Yeah? So it's very important that you describe your methods comprehensively and in detail. Yeah? Another thing that is important, I'll get back to this as well, is try to mix in the methods results or comments that may be interpreted as discussion, right? So methods should be just a pure description of the methods. Don't throw in any results. That will confuse the reviewers particularly. The reviewers get very upset when these kind of things happen. Yeah? So methods is just for the methods, results for results, and so on. Yeah? So it's just a crisp description of the methodology that you follow. All right, now, once you've written the results, you can go on and start describing your the methods. You can go on and start describing the results that you have obtained. Right? Again, here I come back to that question. Right? What is really important for my work? It's a common mistake that you just throw, and I've done this. Trust me. I've just thrown there tons of results that the reviewers could not make sense of. Yeah. So it's a danger if you just throw in a lot of results hoping that the reader or reviewer would understand what you've actually done there. Don't count on that, right? So put in the results section only what is really crucial. What is it? What is related? What is most important? What is related to the hypothesis that you have? Now, group the results in the same order as you grouped the methodology, right? So if you have a methodology with several steps that produce different results, present the results in the same order as the methods that they correspond with, right? So that would make things easier to track. And be quantitative and specific. So when you're comparing to previous work, for example, do thorough statistical analysis, yeah, and provide all the details, right? So it's very common nowadays, more and more common actually for bioengineering journals that you don't just report the p-values, for example, yeah, but you report all the results of a statistical analysis, right? That's that. Now, I mentioned that you should not throw in all the results that you have obtained. I know that we are excited about our work and we think that we should put in there, everything that we've done. But as I said, be selective. Put in the results section only what is most important. And you have now most of the journals, I would say probably all of them, they allow to have a supplementary materials section, which is usually online, right? And that is for free. So you can create documents with secondary results or results that are not that crucial to your work. Put them into a supplementary materials document that can be uploaded on the website of the journal. Yeah. Okay, so once you've written the methods and the results section, I think you are ready to go into the introduction. Now, some people prefer to go on after the results and write also the discussion and the conclusion. Others prefer to write the introduction. Either way I would say from my own experience, when you are a bit more experienced writing papers, it's it's okay to go back to the introduction. Otherwise, for early career, I would suggest that after results, just go on with the discussion and conclusion, and then go back to the introduction. Okay. Now, what is important about the introduction? And again, here I'm giving some hints from the editor's perspective. When you are screening your papers, we actually look at the very specific parts of the introduction for some very specific information. Does the introduction start with the big picture? What is the state of the art, right? What are the most common? What is the relevance of my work, right? So that should be present in the first and second, typically paragraphs of the introduction section. So the big picture, yeah, that should be there. Okay, so once you've established the big picture in the first few paragraphs, then you must mention what are the problems with the current literature. Yeah, so okay, this is the state of the art, these people have done this, the others they approach the problem in a different way, and so on, but there's a gap, right? So identify the gap, make it very clear, right? So there is this problem that is not solved in literature. And then once you've mentioned that, once you've stated that, yeah, so the limitations, gap, and so on, right? You must write about the objectives of your work. What are the objectives? How are you approaching that problem that you identified, right? So you must follow up with this kind of statements, yeah. And briefly summarize a bit how you are approaching that and what is the hypothesis. Yeah? What is the hypothesis? Do you expect that certain experiments would lead to certain findings that will improve the current state of the art, right? So have that towards the end of the introduction section. And very important, towards the last paragraph, so either the last or the last one paragraph of the introduction, make a clear, very clear, explicit statement of the novelty of your work, right? So you must mention there what is actually new, right? So this is the thing that we are actually, as editors, we are, when we are screening the papers, this is one tick that we need to get. If it's not clear for us what is the novelty of this paper, then it's very likely that we will just return it to the authors and we'll mention that it's not clear what is new, you must improve your draft. Okay? So do that. Now, just to give you an idea about the whole structure of the paper, right? So think about the introduction as the larger, the opening here that you see, right? So this is like, we call it an hourglass shape, a clepsydra. Clepsydra. So here you start, as I said, something very general, right? An overview of the current state of the art, everything that is out there. And then you narrow it down to some specific problems that the literature, current literature has, yeah? And what is your action? How are you approaching that? Right? And then you're going to the methodology where is the narrow part, your approach to solving this knowledge gap. And then towards the end of the paper, the perspective opens again, right? So you're putting your results into the wider context of the work out there. You compare to previous works, you again discuss the results and emphasize what is new about your work. Yeah? So the discussion is actually a section in which you interpret your results, right? And you describe them, put them into a broader context, as I mentioned. Right? So you need to mention what is the significance of these results, what do they represent, right? Don't write that in the results section. Write it in the discussion section, right? Do they support your initial hypothesis, the one that is stated into the introduction section? Yeah. How? If not, no. It's very common, and also don't be afraid to publish results that contradict somehow the current knowledge or your original hypothesis. That's perfectly fine, as long as you present solid arguments. You must be conscious that if you're going against the current, the widely accepted knowledge, then you must present very solid facts, very solid results for that, right? So discuss how do your results fit your initial hypothesis in the context of existing work. again, do not just repeat plainly the results, right? The discussion section is where you actually put your results in the context. Yes, you can mention the results again, but with the addition that you offer a perspective, you back up that the pure results with additional dimensions. Yeah. Also, a very common problem, unfortunately, recently is that authors tend to overstate their findings, right? So they claim to actually that their results actually mean more than they mean, you know. So you know, it's something that you need to avoid. Let's say you are developing machine learning algorithm to analyze some data, yeah, and then you're claiming that you are creating an AI system framework that does automated data analysis, and it's a system that picks up also through sensors data. When you're actually not doing that, you're not creating the system that has the sensors themselves, right? You're just analyzing some data. So it's a very common mistake that I see in papers nowadays, right? So many authors try to oversell their results, right? So try to avoid that. The reviewers immediately pick up on that. Also, very positively it is viewed if you openly discuss the weaknesses, right? So state limitations of your work. Many journals and reviewers particularly ask, okay, please state what are your limitations. And this is a good thing here. The trick is that with the limitations, once you state your limitations that you are aware of, right, you avoid being interpolated by the reviewers. Yes, so the reviewers may pick on certain aspects. So if you don't want the reviewers to pick on that, it's a good strategy to actually list it in the limitations. Yeah, my article has a limited sample size. I could not collect more data because of, let's say, I'm working with amputees. Well, it's very difficult to get a lot of data from a lot of amputees, right? So this is a limitation, right? It's a practical, objective limitation. Yeah. So you can state that it's a case study, for example, right? Your work. So be open about the limitations. This will save you from potential trouble down the road with the reviewers. And now, once you've discussed all this, just smoothly transition into the conclusion. And the conclusion should be a brief statement of what is very relevant about your work, right? What is really new? Again, editors look for that. Is the novelty also clearly outlined in the conclusion section? Yeah? It must be explicitly stated there. All right, as well as potential directions for future work, and a brief statement about how does your work advance the field from the present state of knowledge, right? So it gives, again, a broader perspective for your work. All right, so once you've done all this, you've passed through all these sections, you are ready to go into the abstract, right? That's another common mistake, that you start actually with the abstract. And it's, again, it's very difficult to write an abstract from the very beginning. Yeah? One reason could be that, okay, once you have written the paper, you understand the flow of ideas, the things that you are trying to emphasize in your paper is actually different than what you originally stated in the abstract. So you need to go back into the abstract and correct it. And generally, abstract is a very compressed form of your article. So everything must be, sometimes it's word limited, right? So you need to be very careful in structuring it. Now, why is the abstract so important? The abstract is important because, think, when you're searching for a paper, right? The abstract is always freely available, even if the journal is, the article is under a paywall, so you need to pay for it. The abstract is free, right? So the abstract is the first part of your paper that the reader interacts with, right? And how are you getting citations? If you are making the reader so interested to actually download your paper beyond just reading the abstract, right? So if you capture the attention of the reader when reading the abstract, then you're almost halfway through your goal of, you know, having a citation, for example. Yeah. So think of the abstract as the advertisement, the promotion for your work. Yeah. And again, it's visible. This is the part that is visible in all the search engines. And now with AI, so browsers that have this AI feature, right? They can even take information from there and summarize it and put it into their AI generated summary, and then you can get a link maybe from there to your article. You know? So it's very important to structure it in such a way that it is attractive to the reader. So think of an abstract as a condensed version of your whole paper, right? So you start with a sentence or a maximum two about what is the problem and what is the significance of your work, what is the problem that you're trying to address, right? And then another sentence or two about the methods that you're using to address that problem, and then a couple of sentences about your findings, and close with another sentence on the broader significance of your work. Okay. Try to avoid technical jargon. Try to avoid acronyms in the abstract and also in the title. Yeah. So don't use terms that are very technical that probably a person that is not very focused on the specific area of your field would not understand. Now, one thing that used to be more important, but maybe not as important recently, is the cover letter. But me as an editor, I have to tell you that I appreciate receiving a cover letter from authors. And what is a cover letter? It's basically a letter to the editor which states, okay, I'm submitting this work to your journal. These are the main things that I'm addressing. This is what the work is about, right? And I think it is suitable for your journal because of this and that, and the scope of your journal suits my article, right? Again, having this kind of communication gives a positive vibe to the authors. Okay, any question that you have here? So now we've covered, let's say, the author's perspective, right? So when you are preparing the paper, what are the steps that you need to go through? Do you have any questions so far? Anything that you'd like to clarify or? Yes? No, don't use the acronyms in the abstract.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also in the title. For example, if it will be searched by another engineer, then he will use acronyms for finding the...
Yes, but look, the problem is that if you're using acronyms, so I said, many readers may not be aware of that specific. Let's say you're using an acronym for a very specific method that is not widely used out there, right? So that would make it not clear to the reader. So generally, this is also a style issue. So the journals usually don't accept. They have that specifically mentioned in the author guidelines that don't use acronyms in the title. Yeah. You can use so let's say I'm working with EEG, right? Now EEG is, I don't know, maybe doesn't say anything to someone that does winery, right? What is EEG? Are you familiar with what EEG is? Yeah? It's electroencephalography, right? So, but in the title I would use electroencephalography. I would not use the EEG because not everyone is aware with that, right? So that's the main reason. Any other question? Yes?
Thanks for your stuff.
I still have more stuff. Yes.
Okay, thanks for that introduction about that. I think for the primary students and even for our PhD student also gave me some new perspective. But my question is, as a professor from one of the high-level educational level the world of this university, I know. What do you think about the artificial intelligence to combine the degree of using the AI with structure our paper? For example, for now, many students just use this tool, use this instrument at all, 100%. And after that, use another instrument I think you understand what I'm talking about. So.
I would have answered this at the end, but once you asked it, can briefly answer here, and then maybe we can continue the discussion at the end of the presentation. But just be aware of using AI. So as of now, most of the journals, they are very strict in the use of the AI tools such as ChatGPT and so on. So for sure, don't use it to generate original content like figures. Yeah. So it's not, the majority of the journals out there, they are not accepting that. When you are using it, just acknowledge. So let's say you're generating part of the, let's say you have an overview figure and you're generating part of that with AI, right? So just state that, either in the acknowledgements or in the caption, the description of the figure, right? Now, you can use, so what the general guidelines currently are, is that you can use tools such as ChatGPT or any other large language model to correct your language, yeah, so correct the text, but don't use it to generate original material. So don't use it to generate complete text. Yeah? For correcting language, grammar error, and so on, yes, you can use that. Be aware that many journals currently have AI detection tools. Yeah, so there are tools, and I will show you a bit later, that check for plagiarism, and now they have a feature implemented that can detect the probability that the text is generated by a large language model. Yeah? So this is a huge field of discussion actually in many universities around the globe. I'm pretty sure that also here in Moldova. How much do we allow students, first of all, to use this in classrooms, in projects and so on, and even more in scientific publications. So currently the general, just to briefly close it here and we can discuss more afterwards, is that whenever you're using it, don't use it to generate original content like text or figures completely, yeah? Use to correct some of the things that you're doing. And in places where you're generating, as I said, parts of your figure, for example, explicitly mention it in the text. Yeah? I know that some, initially a year ago or so, even some journals experimented with accepting AI as co-author. So I think there were one or two journals, well established, not some fringe journals, that did that. But then they ended up with the conclusion that that's better not the right way to do. So for sure, yeah, try to avoid the use of AI-generated content. All right, so you have submitted you've completed drafting your manuscript, right? So you're ready to submit it to a journal. So I'll try to give now a few things, a bit of background on what happens to your manuscript once it has been submitted, right? This is generally kind of like it certainly was for me in the early years of my career, kind of like a black box. Whatever happens, you know. For me, in the first years, like editors were like these scary persons that their whole purpose were to just reject my paper, you know. So that's not the case, and I hope that will be clear from what I'm describing here. And you will see that actually the purpose of editors is to help you improve your manuscript, even if eventually your manuscript gets rejected. But the whole idea is to help you improve your manuscript, right? And maybe submit it somewhere else or submit it to the same journal, but get some feedback that can help you improve the manuscript, right? So what happens when we're getting a manuscript from you as authors, right? What happens is that first the manuscript gets screened by the journal office. So these are non-scientific assistants that check for things such as the formatting. Does the paper follow the formatting style of the journal, right? Does it follow the structure that the journal has? And you can get this information. Every journal has an author guidelines section. Sometimes even they offer templates, right? So you can follow those templates. So make sure that you read that before actually starting drafting your paper, and not do that at the end after you write your paper and understand, oh, I should have structured this. Some journals start with after the introduction, they have the results section, right? Like science and so on. And they have the methods as the last section. So try to avoid this thing. Always go through first to the author's guidelines. So this is what the editorial, the journal office does. Checks for this kind of formatting issues, right? So once they decide that the paper generally follows the guidelines. Then they forward it to the editorial team. So that's, in our case, in our journal, it's the editor-in-chief and the 5 deputy editors who do the screening, right? So we are doing the screening. As I said, we're currently receiving about 3,000 manuscripts per year, right? That's an increase of about 60% since last year. I can tell you that back in 2020, we were receiving 800 manuscripts per year. So it's a huge increase, and this is not something that only our journal faces. All the journals that are facing this issue for various reasons. Of course, more scientists, but unfortunately also more papers that are being produced by paper mills, some groups that are creating, you know, very low quality material. So our job is to screen the papers and select only those that are very relevant for the scope, the topic of our journal, yeah, and also try to reduce the load from the reviewers, because it's very difficult to get reviewers nowadays, good quality reviewers, right? So what we're doing, we are screening, and I will go there. I have some slides on that, how we are screening, but the idea is that currently we are, I think in our journal, we are screening about 80%, so about 80% of the submissions we are desk rejecting. Yeah, so only 20% of the submissions go further to the review process. So that's why the points that I mentioned about specifying the novelty and making nice figures and clearly understandable content is very important, because here at the screening stage, I personally have about an afternoon, so I have about 4 hours Friday afternoon in which I'm screening probably 20 papers, or let's say in good cases some 10 papers, right? So I have a few minutes that I can go through a manuscript that is maybe 20 pages and decide whether is it relevant for my journal, is it novel, what is the significance, and so on, right? So once we decide that a paper passes these few checks that I mentioned, we can submit, we can forward these manuscripts to the associate editors, and the associate editors are people that are more specialized in the narrower area of your journal, right? So I may not be aware if someone is submitting work on, let's say, nanomaterials that have some applications in biology and medicine, right? My area of interest is different, so I will forward this manuscript to an associate editor that has background in that specific area, right? So that person can subsequently send your manuscript to reviewers who he knows or she knows that they are, again, very well trained and they have strong background in the narrow focus of your work. Yeah? So they can give constructive comments and relevant comments to you. They collect these comments, they create a short report, and they send it back to us, to the deputy editors, to decide. They make a suggestion for the decision, yeah, which I will go through next, and then they send it back to us. So this is the whole workflow, right? So once the paper goes through these steps, reviewers, associate editors, back to us, we can send the recommendation to the editor-in-chief, and then the editor-in-chief takes the final decision, right? So in the case when the paper is being screened for desk rejection by the editorial team, then the decision goes this way, and it goes back to the authors with the relevant comments. So it's very important here, the kind of check that we're doing, as I mentioned, as the editorial board. We check whether there is an ethical statement. Yeah, that's very important. We check for plagiarism, so we get by the journal platform, we get the plagiarism report. So where we see that, let's say maybe 30-something% of the content, the text content in the manuscript is similar to other papers out there. So in that case, that's a flag. So we may return to the authors, right? We check again the novelty and the impact, and that's what we're actually doing. Yeah. So just to give you an idea here, yeah. So this is how our journal platform looks like, right? So we're getting this kind of report with a text similarity This is an older version, so it does not have the AI-related output. But it tells us. So in this case, for this specific manuscript, we had a 23% similarity. So that's still acceptable. As low as it's below 25%, that's fine. If it's above 25%, that we need to check. We're going into, okay, why is it so high similarity? Right? So you need to try to avoid that kind of situation. Okay. So let's say that we are. I'll just go faster than this. Yeah, so let's say your manuscript has passed this screening and it's ready to go to the review process. So as I said, the goal of the whole review process is to try to improve your work, right? Try to get constructive feedback from the reviewers. The reviewers are not there to just destroy your work, to make you feel bad about it, right? Unfortunately, that thing happens quite often. It happens also to us when we're submitting papers to other journals. But that's an issue that the associate editors, together with the deputy editors and the editor-in-chief, need to address, right? So it's not always the case that the actual comments of the reviewers are taken word by word by the editors, right? It's often the case that the editors may overlook some of the suggestions by the reviewers, and they will make it clear to you. So when you receive a report from the editor, read it carefully and see what the editor suggests to you. Right? He or she may suggest things that some of the things that the reviewers ask are not so important. So read very carefully that part. Okay. So keep in mind that reviewers have this set of questionnaires that they are going through, right? So they need to give points for this and give free text feedback. So does the paper contain sufficiently new material? Is it presented concisely and well organized? Are the methods and experiments presented in a way that they can be replicated? So all the details are there. Are the results presented adequately? Is the discussion relevant? Conclusions supported by the data presented, language acceptable, and so on. So basically, they have kind of a standardized questionnaire that they need to go through, right? So keep this in mind so that you're preparing your manuscript with these things in your mind, right? Now, so let's say the reviewers have come up with a suggestion, and the associate editor makes a recommendation for a decision. It is very rare that you will get an accept decision from the very first round, so it's quite common that you will have to pass through a major revision decision and then a minor revision, and then you get your paper accepted. So this is a recurring process, right? It needs to go through several rounds of review until the reviewers and the editors are happy with the changes that you've made to the manuscript. And again, the whole idea is to help you improve your manuscript. Right? Now, many times, as I said, the decision is rejected, right? So don't be put down by that. But how do you respond to reviewers' comments, right? I have to tell you that I mean, you probably here would be on the same page. The first, particularly when you're getting a major revision or rejection, you tend to get very upset, right? So this reviewer does not understand what I'm doing, he's clueless and whatever. So the first reaction is not very positive, right? So the suggestion here is that don't take it personal. Don't start working immediately after receiving the decision. Just think for a while about it, digest the idea, and accept the idea that your work needs to be improved, to be accepted, and then try to address the reviewer comments in an objective manner. Always respond, even if you believe that the comments of the reviewers are not to the point, sometimes, let's admit it, even dumb, yeah? But respond to each of them, so your letter of response to the journal should contain point-by-point answer to all the comments of the reviewer. Now, don't be aggressive, yeah? Try to explain in an objective manner. Give details. Don't give all the details in the response, but point out to the paper, to the parts of the paper that actually, so highlight those parts that actually you have changed in the paper to address the questions of the reviewer. Yeah? What if, as I said, what if you don't agree with the reviewer's comment? Don't ignore it. Just try to argue for your point. Try to give a detailed explanation. Sometimes it's even useful that you write to the editors. You say that separately, so when you're submitting your, resubmitting your manuscript, you say, well, the reviewer suggested, reviewer number 1 suggested us to do this and that, but we think that that's not appropriate for specific reasons that you need to detail, right? So establish a good communication with the editor as well. Okay? Now, sorry for rushing, but I think we're a bit over time here. So I think this would be very useful. Yeah. So what are the common reasons that manuscripts are rejected? And here I just included everything that deals with rejection. I mean, both the desk rejection, yeah, so without the review process, but also following the review process. So keep in mind that one of the most common reason for manuscript to be rejected is the scope and the journal fee. So that means that the study does not clearly align with the journal name and readership. So read the author guidelines. Check previously published papers in that journal. Does it fit with the topic of your work? If yes, then this should not be a problem for your paper. Another very common reason for rejecting is the lack of scientific novelty and significance, right? So again, here is very important that you actually state the novelty of your work. You make it very clear. You substantiate it in a very detailed manner in your paper. Yeah. Sometimes, and this is, I would say, the most radical part, is that, well, the reviewers identify that there are some methodological or experimental design errors. Or the methods are not clearly described. So then you need to, in some cases, you need to do some more experiments. So that's something that unfortunately will delay your publication, but you need to take that into account. Another common reason, but this is mostly for the desk rejection cases. It's the case when the structure and the presentation of the paper does not. It's not proper for the specific journal, or sometimes in some cases, unfortunately, even for a scientific publication. So sometimes, the author just do a very bad job in structuring their manuscripts. Another point here that is very important, I mentioned the ethical and the transparency standards. So mention, particularly when you're working with animals or with human subjects, mention the ethical approval for your study. This is something that all journals require nowadays. Make sure that you state any conflict of interest in the paper, and so on. Now this is the most subjective of all reason for getting the papers rejected, and sometimes it just happens that the editors do not find that your work is really interesting for the audience of the journal, right? So let's say you're publishing in a journal that has worldwide audience, work about subgroup population in Moldova, right? Maybe the editors will not be interested in that, or not necessarily Moldova, like any other country, right? So they would suggest another journal that is better fitted for that scope. Again, this is quite subjective, so this is at the latitude of the editors, but I would say that this does not happen that often. Okay? And the most important thing here is that do not give up, right? So even if you get a rejection, just use the feedback, and that's what we're trying to do at MBEC as editors, is to try to give constructive feedback to the authors that will help them, even if we're rejecting the paper, that will help them improve the paper for resubmission at our journal or any other journal. I will skip here. I had some few more slides, but it's already too late. Maybe just one word. If you're doing collaborative writing, so you are in a bigger group, when drafting the paper, there are several good tools out there. Maybe you're familiar with Google Docs. Most of the people use that, right? So you're writing together with colleagues a paper or with your supervisor, and then you do that online so that you can do the writing faster. A very useful tool that we are currently using is Overleaf. And the good thing for this is that it offers templates for many journals, and then it uses the LaTeX format, right? And it generates in real time the PDF view of the manuscript that is suitable to the template of the journal where you intend to submit your work. So I'll just conclude here. So maybe the most important part is to not leave gaps in your paper, right? So when you're reading, once you've completed writing the draft of a paper, maybe give it to, of course you need to give it to your supervisor, right, to get feedback from them, but sometimes it's useful even to give it to your colleagues, right? Someone who you trust, of course, because this is very sensitive. But give this to read to somebody else, someone that you're close to get their opinion. Do you understand what I'm trying to read here? Do you feel like there are some details that are missing? You know, so it's always useful to get this kind of feedback. And always make sure that there is a very logical flow, very good logical flow, very good line that goes through your article from the very beginning to the end. As I mentioned, that hourglass shape, right? Start with the general view, narrow it down, and then open it up again, right? So make sure that there's a clear flow, there are not abrupt changes between paragraphs, between sections in your paper. Okay? And maybe the most important part, do not procrastinate, right? So don't leave it for tomorrow what you can do today. It's very difficult. So what my best strategy for this is that when I'm writing the paper, I set aside, let's say, every day, maybe an hour in the morning. Morning works best for me because that's when my mind is, you know, clear, and I can write down, even if I'm writing just one paragraph or two paragraphs, that's enough. You know, just set a goal, say today I'm going to write 2 paragraphs from the methods. Just write it down. Right? So don't leave it for, because you will, if you leave it for later, you'll always enter, you know, this time pressure crisis and so on. Yeah? So that's it. We're a bit over time, sorry. If you have questions, please ask them. Anyone? Yes.
I think I can ask.
Yeah.
It will be hard to manage the right way to say it. I mean, we all know that the articles are like public and it is only to improve the science balloon where everybody knows what it is about and help others also to repeat it. But normally for you as a scientist, the more benefits comes after the patent. And when you patent something, I mean, it's really hard to manage which company can do it, how to make the relations, and then...
That's a very important topic, but it's also quite different than
I wanted to ask you, as I mean, with a lot of experience, if you had something like that,
yes.
Some companies...
So patents, yes, are very important, particularly if you are establishing collaborations with industry, right? And in Singapore, the environment is such that they encourage very much collaboration with industry. So having a patent always gives you an upper hand, you know, allows you to attract funding easier, for sure. Many universities encourage spin-offs, so companies that are created on some idea that must be patented because the intellectual property needs to be preserved by the university where you're developing your ideas, right? So yes, patents are important. But I would say patents are more important towards the, not so much in the early stages of your career, but later. Yeah? In the early stages of your career, let's say you're a postdoc or a PhD student, papers are more important because, first of all, it's generally more difficult, not always, but generally more difficult to get a patent in the very early stages of your research, right? That's one thing. And the second thing, when you're getting, let's say you're going to do a postdoc somewhere abroad, right? It's easier when you have papers published, right? That's already part of your CV. It's already a very good recommendation for you. You have some papers. Nowadays there are universities that expect that even undergrads, they have papers. I mean, in Singapore, it's very common that you don't accept master students if they don't have some publications, you know. Because commonly the trend is here, and I also hear, right, you're encouraging undergrads to participate in research. So once you participate in research, it's a good thing to publish also that work. So once you publish your work, it shows that your work has been reviewed, has been accepted by experts in the field, right? So it gives you another weight, gives another weight to your CV, more weight to your CV, right? So I would say in the early stages of the career, having papers, journal papers particularly, but also conference papers, yes, it's very important for the CV. Once you are mid-stage to, you know, senior stage of the career, yeah, patents become probably more important. You know, if you want to get tenure, a patent weighs much more than journals. But even for professors, I mean, their activity is also some of the criteria are related to publication, to journal publications. You must have a certain number of journal publications in specific impact factor journals to get tenure, for example, right? So both of them are important.
Maybe for the future it will be nice to have another presentation of how to make the relation with the business area to show.
Yes, there are some conferences actually that do that, and I've been to a conference recently in Bosnia where they invited a person that used to work in academia. He had a consultancy company that was consulting startups on how to get funding, you know, and he gave a very nice presentation on you know, how to pitch your ideas as students, and there was a competition at the conference actually on pitching ideas for startups, you know, and there were, in the jury there were some people from the industry, and they were judging the ideas of the students. So it was, besides the young investigator competition, it was also these pitching ideas for startups. So yeah, I think that's something very useful. Any other question? No? If not, thank you. And you have our email. I don't know if you wrote it down, but it's, oh, sorry, maybe it's this way. So please contact me anytime. I'd be happy to help with advice and any other career-related question that you might have. Or also if you wanted some of, this is another thing that maybe I omitted mentioning, is that it's very common that you actually write to an editor before submitting the paper, and if you have doubts that the topic of your paper is fitted for that specific journal, you may write to the editor and say, look, I intend to submit this work to your journal. Do you think it's acceptable, it's interesting for your journal? You can do that. You know, it's quite common. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.